Only for You. Written by Just Thinking Drabbles. Read by Rashi. The scratch of a quill scribbling against parchment and the popping of candlelight filled the Prime Minister's office as Ferdinand once again burned the midnight oil. The room had become a bit stuffy, so he had cracked a window earlier to allow the light springtime breeze to flow into the room, along with removing his jacket and unbuttoning the first 2 buttons of his shirt. It was late, arguably much later than he would normally be working, but he couldn't help himself. There was too much work to be done, and not enough hours in the day to complete them. Besides, once he was focused on something, he could not rest until he had finished it, or else he would be up half the night thinking about it. It was indeed better for him to complete the task now than to worry about it later. Thus he promised himself that after finishing this last document he was reviewing, he would put his desk in order and go straight to bed. It was not a habit he intended to pursue, after all. Yet, lately, he found himself adopting all sorts of unhealthy rituals to the day, which had not been there prior to spending so much time with a certain fellow minister. It seemed that since he had begun courting Hubert, the man's inability to sleep instead of work was beginning to rub off on him, and he felt rather silly when he thought about all the times he had chided him for doing this exact thing. Hubert would probably tease him for it in the most wonderful way, too, and maybe even let out that enticingly deep laugh of his as he did so. Perhaps he would tilt his head at just the right angle so that his lovely hidden eye would peek out beneath his fringe and— Ferdinand blinked as he shook his head to force away the ignoble thoughts. His cheeks were crimson, and felt hot as he brought his fingertips to them. His heart was racing rapidly in his chest, and he placed his hand over it to calm down. Of course, he and Hubert had been dating for 2 months now, but somehow it still felt a little wrong to be thinking of him in such a way. He sighed as he placed his head in the palm of his hand. No matter how much he wanted to, he did not have time to be daydreaming about Hubert at present, and decided to turn his attention back to the document he had been writing on. Yet he did not get further than a sentence before the object of his distractions came knocking at his door with a request to enter. Ferdinand did his best to make himself look presentable by straightening his chair and fiddling with the ends of his hair to make them look less tangled, then allowed him to open the door. "Hubert," he said with a patently cheery tone, "what brings you here at such a late hour, my love?" Hubert stepped further into the room. The candlelight bathed him in its soft orange glow, and made his green eyes shimmer like rare jewels. Ferdinand felt breathless at the sight of them. "A number of things, really. I must say I am rather surprised to find you here. You are not normally awake at this time of night." "Indeed, but there were some things I wished to finish before tomorrow, so I thought it best to complete them before retiring." A light hum followed as a response, and then they fell silent, staring at one another in expectant thought. After a minute or so, Ferdinand cleared his throat. Hubert, was there something you needed from me?" When Hubert looked up from staring holes into the carpet, there was something in his gaze that Ferdinand had not recognized before. If he was not mistaken, Hubert almost looked nervous. He exhaled through his nose as he stepped closer to the desk, and it was only then that Ferdinand realized he was holding something behind his back. "I wanted to, well, you see, since today was— this should not be so hard to say." The last part was whispered to himself, scolding his inability to phrase his words properly. He took another deep breath before continuing. "Seeing as today is your birthday, and we have been courting for a few months now, I thought it would be in the best interest of our relationship to give you a gift. So, here." He held out a bag of tea leaves which he had been hiding, and a light blush blossomed on his pale cheeks. He tried to hide it by turning his face slightly into the shadows more, but Ferdinand saw it nonetheless. He looked up at him with eyes wide and mouth agape, trying desperately to find the words to express his surprise at not only Hubert, but also himself. "Today is my birthday?" he stated, but it sounded more like a question. "Today is the 30th of the great tree moon. That is your birthday, isn't it?" He waited a moment for Ferdinand to respond, but when he had enough of the tormenting silence, he turned on his heels to leave. Perhaps I have made a mistake. I shall take my leave, and we can forget this ever happened." Seeing him about to walk out the door awoke Ferdinand from his stupor, and he quickly jumped up, knocking the inkwell over in the process and watching it spill out onto the desk. Yet the mess before him was the farthest thing from his mind right now. All he could think about was keeping Hubert from leaving. "No, stay! You are right. Today is my birthday. My apologies for not responding, but it surprised me that you remembered it even when I did not." Hubert crooked his bow upward in amusement. "A strange thing to forget, if you ask me." Ferdinand chuckled. "Perhaps so." He looked down at the ink spilling over his desk and the documents he had spent the last several hours working on. and then up at the man, standing before him, clutching the bag of tea as if it were a lifeline. He smiled warmly at him in hopes it would ease the tension surrounding him. "Hubert, my love, would you like to have some of that tea with me? I think I am in need of a bit of a break tonight, and it would be a shame to drink it all by myself." At hearing this, the barest hint of a smirk filled his face, and he nodded. "If that is your wish, then I would be happy to oblige, my sunlight."